Good morning. Thank you for joining me today for Monday Morning Devotion. Today we're going to take a look at chapter 2 of my book, Encounters with God in the Battles of Life. This chapter is about naming your battles and identifying your enemies. When we look at Jehoshaphat's life, he didn't have a name for his battle like the Vietnam War or World War II, so I aptly named it the Battle of 2 Chronicles chapter 20. We do know his enemies, though. They were the Moabites, the Ammonites, and the Meunites. So in looking at that, I really truly believe that it helps us when we name our battles instead of beating around the bush about what is going on. We just give it a name. That helps us to make some progress and have some steps toward being victorious. For example, if someone has a hurting marriage, they can continue to complain about their spouse, the things they do or don't do, their lack of attention to detail and to ourselves, or their laziness, or that they work too much, or they're never home, or they're mean-spirited. They let their mother take over, whatever we want to complain about. But instead, if we name the battle and we say, I have a dying marriage, now we have a title. Now we have identified, we have named our problem. And now the next step is identifying who our enemy is and what is going on and who is involved that is destroying our marriage and keeping us from having a healthy marriage and purpose and victory over the situation in our lives. And so once we do that, then we can make the steps that are necessary in gaining victory and making progress that we ourselves need to do, as well as whatever else, books we can read, counseling we can get, praying even in the right direction, and making changes in ourselves that will make the marriage more healthy. That's just one example. There are many battles people face, and they are all battles, and not one is worse or less worse than the other. They all put us on our knees and keep us awake at night. And so naming it and identifying the enemy will give you the steps to move forward. Battles come in many different forms. Of course, there's physical, there's personal and relational, and there's spiritual. And whatever the situation that we find ourselves in, the battle is real and the enemy is real. And so instead of putting the blame on something or someone, we name it and go forward. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 tells us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Well, I am careful not to blame everything on Satan. I do spend quite a bit of time in this section and chapter of the book about Satan, who he is and who he is not, and how from the beginning of time, his main purpose in life is to kill, steal, and destroy. Jesus said that himself in John 10, verse 10. And how at Jesus' death, he was defeated, and Jesus' death and resurrection, he was defeated. If we stopped right there, and that's all the further we got, life would be pretty depressing and seem hopeless. But if you remember, I started the chapter by stating an army engaging in war must be able to identify the difference between their allies and their enemies. That we spend quite a bit of time, naming our battle and discovering who the enemy of our soul is. We also need to take a look at who our allies are, our friends. And of course, we know God himself comes alongside of us to comfort us and to help us. And he also gives us a church body with which of people with like-minded faith that come alongside and help us carry our burdens, and partners to help us walk through this life Godly people who point us to God, who carry our burdens to God in prayer and offer good advice, and out of nowhere just show up when we need them most. Look at God's word. For example, it's full of these type of examples of people supporting people. Moses and Aaron, Naomi and Ruth, Mordecai and Esther, Paul and Silas, Jesus and his 12 disciples. And I do talk about the allies that God gives us when I talk about Jehoshaphat's allies later on in the book, and we'll get to that. But who are your allies? Who are you an ally to? Sometimes we are the receivers, and sometimes we are the givers, and sometimes we're both at the same time. Galatians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. I did talk about that verse in an earlier YouTube video. Sometimes we will find ourselves carrying another person's burden, and sometimes we will find people carrying ours. I want you to be encouraged this week. No matter what battle you are facing, you are not alone. God is with you when it seems that all else has failed. Walk with him by your side. With God as your partner, you can confidently face the day, the week, and the situation that you are battling. Go to him in prayer, read his word, and listen to his voice. Let him give you the strength that you need. And be there for someone else who needs what God has given you to share with them. For more information about my book, Encounters with God in the Battles of Life, please visit my website, www.candyporstowski.com. Thanks again for visiting with me this Monday morning. I look forward to seeing you next Monday.